The heavy oak door did little to muffle the fury from within the study. Leo Vance was incandescent, his voice a torrent of indignation. He demanded to know why he was being forced to clean up his brother's mess, to be shackled to some omega his brother had deemed unworthy. He proclaimed that this was not his marriage, that the person on the other side of the door was not his partner, and he would not accept it. He insisted his parents send the omega home and cancel the whole humiliating affair. Inside the sprawling library, surrounded by the scent of old paper and lemon polish, Caleb sat perfectly still. He listened to the tantrum with an air of detached calm, his expression unreadable. He could, on some level, sympathize with the younger Vance brother. Being bound by the Federation Registry's compatibility edict felt like a relic from a bygone era. A 99% pheromonal match was supposed to guarantee a perfect union and superior offspring, but Ethan, his actual fiancé, had found the notion suffocating. He'd fled for some digital romance he'd never even had the courage to mention, leaving this disaster in his wake. Mr. Vance's weary tone drifted through the wood. He urged his son to at least see Caleb before making a final decision, reminding him that Caleb was celebrated across the sector for his ethereal looks, a match he had personally fought to secure for the Vance name. Leo's reply was a sneer. He scoffed that looks were irrelevant, that he wasn't some superficial fool to be swayed by a pretty face. He declared he would not be bound by antiquated biology or his father's dynastic ambitions. The marriage had to be annulled. His voice grew louder with each word, a crescendo of youthful rebellion. Finally, the study door was kicked open with a resounding crack. Mr. Vance stood there, his face a mask of pure exasperation, informing his son that fine, if it meant so much to him, he could consider it a proxy marriage. He would be standing in for his brother, nothing more. Leo, held back by his mother, clutched his side where his father's foot had nearly connected. He shouted after his father that Caleb would be his sister-in-law, and that was the end of it. Mrs. Vance gently intervened, asking her husband why he was forcing the issue. Hiding behind her, Leo promised her a far better match someday, someone who would provide her with a litter of grandchildren to dote upon. Caleb decided he had heard quite enough. He rose from the leather armchair. The registry had a 30-day dissolution clause for unwilling participants. He would invoke it now. He pulled open the heavy library doors and stepped into the hall. The tirade stopped mid-syllable. Leo Vance, who had been pacing and gesturing wildly, froze. His hazel eyes, framed by dark lashes, went wide as they landed on Caleb. The tension in the hallway didn't just dissipate. It transformed, coiling into something new and electric. Leo slowly turned to his father, his voice suddenly small and breathless. He asked if this was the partner his father had chosen for him. The hope in his gaze was so naked it was almost alarming. Mr. Vance, thoroughly annoyed, bitingly reminded him of his recent passionate speech against the very concept. Leo's face fell, the brilliant hope extinguished and replaced by a look of profound, comical disappointment, as if his father had single-handedly failed at the most important task of his life. This tipped Mr. Vance over the edge. He launched into a tirade about the thanklessness of his progeny, how he had meticulously chosen the perfect omega for Ethan, only for his eldest to run off without a single glance. Throughout the lecture, Leo's gaze kept darting back to Caleb. Each time their eyes met, a deep crimson blush crept up his neck and stained the tips of his ears. Hearing that Caleb had been intended for Ethan sparked a realization. His expression shifted, and the blush deepened until his entire face was flushed. His parents, noticing his strange, silent agitation, exchanged a look. His mother wondered aloud if his cycle was coming on unexpectedly, earning a mortified glare from her son. Caleb ignored the chaotic family dynamic. He had other prospects, other alphas with impressive compatibility scores. Ethan's silent, cowardly departure had severed any obligation he felt. He began to politely articulate his desire to formally dissolve the contract. Panic flared in Leo's eyes. He blurted out that his brother's cowardice was his own problem, reminding everyone that his own compatibility score with Caleb was also 99%. Realizing how frantic he sounded, he coughed, struggling for a shred of dignity. He amended his statement, clarifying that it wasn't that he personally wished to marry Caleb. Rather, he was simply a devoted son, willing to uphold his family's honor and spare his parents any further distress. He latched onto the excuse, his confidence growing with every word. He declared it a noble tradition for a brother to step up in a time of crisis. Mr. Vance hurled one of his loafers at him for the morbid implication. Leo dodged it neatly, continuing his spiel. He argued that Ethan was irresponsible, that he couldn't handle someone of Caleb's caliber, whereas he, Leo, was perfectly suited to bear such a magnificent burden. He concluded with a flourish, entirely willing. Mrs. Vance watched her son's dizzying reversal with a look of pained embarrassment. She quietly suggested Caleb might reconsider, adding that for all his immaturity, her younger son was fiercely loyal. Caleb paused. Loyalty. In an alpha, that was a currency far more valuable than wealth or status. The world was littered with powerful alphas who viewed fidelity as an option, not a requirement. This one, while guileless and temperamental, might prove more manageable than a more worldly counterpart. He glanced at Leo, who was now attempting to look casual while blatantly eavesdropping. The 30-day trial period suddenly seemed like a fascinating experiment. He gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Leo let out a triumphant whoop. Mr. Vance grumbled about someone's sudden change of heart. Undeterred, Leo slung an arm around his father's shoulders, proclaiming that his brother deserved someone good, but Caleb was the best. In one swift motion, he pulled Caleb into the library with him and shut the doors firmly in his parents' faces. Alone in the room, Leo's hand remained linked with Caleb's. A sudden shyness seemed to overwhelm him. The air grew thick with a sweet, intoxicating scent, like warm caramel drizzled over cream. As Caleb tried to identify the source of the unique pheromone, Leo abruptly released his hand, his face burning. The scent triggered a cascade of memories. The avatar in the full immersion sim he had been dating, the one he believed to be Ethan. On occasion, the persona would shift dramatically. The confident, suave alpha would become tentative and flustered. That same caramel scent would emanate from the haptic interface. This shy version would blush at virtual touch, stammering about the dangers of alphas, his own pheromonal signals betraying every word. He had even tried to talk himself down, painting himself as a philanderer unworthy of Caleb's attention, offering to introduce him to a better alpha whose description sounded suspiciously like an idealized version of himself. And then there was the other account, the clingy apprentice who had attached himself to Caleb in-game. Jealous, possessive, and prone to sabotaging any other player who got too close, all while reeking of that same sweet caramel. Leo's voice, now laced with a familiar, petulant jealousy, pulled Caleb back to the present. He was asking if Caleb was still thinking about his brother, his pout a perfect mirror of the apprentice's digital avatar. He began to parrot the same lines from the game about how irresponsible and undeserving Ethan was. A slow smile touched Caleb's lips. It was all absurdly amusing. The Vances were known for their rigid code of honor. Leo's attempts at slander were laughably transparent. He looked at the younger brother, at his stunningly handsome face now clouded with a raw, anxious vulnerability. He decided to play along. He stepped closer, his voice low, and asked if Leo even knew what a wedding night required. Leo went utterly still, the blush on his face deepening to a painful-looking scarlet. He could only stammer, his mind clearly blank. Caleb pressed further, asking if he'd ever participated. The wide, innocent terror in Leo's eyes was answer enough. Satisfied, Caleb simply told him to go take a shower. Looking immensely relieved, Leo grabbed a change of clothes. He paused at the bathroom door, hesitating. He asked, his voice barely a whisper, if this meant Caleb was now his partner. He added quickly that Caleb wasn't allowed to think about his brother anymore. Caleb just laughed and tossed a decorative cushion at him. 1 month. It was a trial period. But for a chance with an S-class alpha of Leo's quality, it was hardly a chore. While Leo was in the shower, the caramel scent drifting out from under the door, his data slate on the desk lit up. A chat window was open. Curious, Caleb picked it up. It was a conversation with Ethan. His brother was asking if Caleb had left yet. Leo's reply was a masterpiece of manipulation. He'd written that Caleb was still there, but that Ethan had dodged a cannonball. He described Caleb as cold and merely average-looking. He urged his brother to stay away, to follow his heart, and even transferred a massive amount of CRS to Ethan's account to fund his continued absence. A new message from Ethan appeared. He was distraught. His online love had blocked him 2 hours ago. He was terrified it was because she'd heard about the wedding and was asking Leo for advice on how to win her back. Caleb calmly picked up his own device. In his blocked list was the familiar avatar of Ethan Vance. When Leo emerged from the bathroom, his face was scrubbed clean and his eyes were bright with a shy, hopeful anticipation. Caleb stood and circled him slowly. He asked, his voice deceptively mild, if Leo truly thought he was merely average. Leo froze. His eyes flickered to the data slate in Caleb's hand, and all the color drained from his face. He tried to bluff, stammering that yes, he was, and that only someone as generous as himself would be willing to marry him. Caleb turned to leave. He had no time for such childish games. A soft thud sounded behind him. He looked down to see Leo on the floor, arms wrapped tightly around his legs, his body trembling. He begged him not to go. Caleb stared down at the gorgeous, powerful alpha reduced to a pleading mess at his feet. His resolve wavered. Leo looked up, his expression utterly broken. He whispered that Caleb had chosen his brother online so many times. He was just scared. Something in Caleb's chest shifted. He knelt, turning Leo's face up to meet his gaze. He asked Leo what he should say, what his honest feelings were, if he truly wanted Caleb to choose him. Leo stared at Caleb's lips, mesmerized and silent. Caleb prompted him again, his voice a soft command. He wanted the truth. Finally, Leo spoke, his voice thick with emotion. He confessed that he despised being forced to do anything. But if the person forcing him was Caleb, he would surrender everything.